RollerBall, the 1975 classic.
Hey bro, you can't talk about Rollerball without talking about Rollerball 2002.
Get out of here, Chris Klein. I mean, are you even in movies anymore?
Hey, I'm in TV stuff mostly. I mean, shut up. LL Cool J, back me up. Hey, I'm LL Cool J. You better back off my buddy Chris. Get him, Chris!
Hey, guys, we can talk about this. We don't have to... Oh, no, come on. Don't do this.
I learned how to fight in Street Fighter. You better watch yourself.
Oh, come on, Chris. Man, that's not... Oh, no, back off.
LL Cool J's gonna knock you out just like my #1 hit signal.
No, oh, shit. Oh, God. Come on, guys. No. Now
I'm gonna do to you what Street Fighter The Legend of Chun-Li did to Chris and Crook's career.
Oh, James Caan, I had this terrible dream. They remade Rollerball, and Chris Klein was there, and then LL Cool J showed up. Oh, it was awful. Oh. Yeah, I'm sorry. They remade it in 2002. No. No! Rollerball versus Rollerball. When Hollywood runs out of ideas and resurrects a forgotten cult classic from the 70s, except the only thing they liked was the name and nothing else from the film they're remaking. There is such a drastic difference between the remake and the original, so much so that I actually hesitate to call the remake Rollerball. It has some elements of Rollerball, like it has a ball, and they skate around. However, the remake lacks in a number of areas that make it a really poor retelling, and completely misses the mark when it comes to addressing the original. Both films are based on a short story called Rollerball Murder. At least that's what the 2002 film claims. It credits the short story, but takes next to nothing from it. And also takes next to nothing from the 1975 film, for that matter. The 1975 film shares elements from the short story because the screenwriter and the short story author were the same person. But let's dive right in and compare both films. Let's start with the intro. The 1975 and 2002 version of the films have drastically different intros. What works so well about the 1975 is that the intro shows you the world without having to explain much. And it does so by letting you watch the start of a rollerball match, with the announcer giving you a little bit of information and insight into how the game is played. Within about 2 minutes, you understand the nuances, and the shots are fast-paced and well put together, and that gives you a sense of how the game is played and what's going on. So from the beginning of the game, you get an idea that this world is actually different than our own. The 2002 film has an intro of San Francisco, where our main character is doing extreme sports, and goes downhill really fast, while getting chased by police. So we're shown that this is basically present day, and nothing about this world is different. Our character then meets his friend Marcus, who rescues him from the police, and then tries to recruit him for rollerball, a sport that takes place in Central Asia. And then it takes a while for us to even see rollerball to begin with. So from the very start, the 2002 version goes down a very different path. So instead of going down a gently sloping rollerball track, the film takes you straight down a hill in San Francisco and crashes you through a storefront window with this kind of extreme sport nonsense. The 1975 version of the film wants you to understand the game of rollerball and get invested, so it shows you how to do it in a clear way. And the game itself is pretty easy to follow, with teams racing around a track with the goal of getting through the opposing team to score. In contrast, the 2002 version almost has the rollerball sport as an afterthought, with a bunch of random extreme sports incorporated into it to make it more interesting. But as a result, the game just becomes more jarring and harder to follow based on what they do. But because rollerball is in the title of both films, let's talk about the sport and how the films address them. What the 1975 version of the film does so well is show you instead of tell. The game is shown in such a good manner that it really doesn't need a whole lot of explanation for you to understand how it's played. For the first 17 minutes of the 1975 version of the film, you're shown a match of rollerball, and you pick up the game really fast, and the film doesn't explain much of it to you. And it does a wonderful job because the 1975 version assumes you're not an idiot, and respects the audience enough to show you instead of tell you in mindless dialogue. The 2002 version of the film, on the other hand, makes their version of the game so convoluted and dumb that it becomes almost impossible to follow. They literally spend an entire scene in the film explaining it, with CG graphics to guide you. And honestly, at some point in the film you think someone would have sat back and realized, wow, what did we do? Something's wrong and we have to explain it in this much depth to make the game make sense. But no, they just kept moving forward with it. And this is one of the main things that's so strange about RollerBall 2002. It's not just how it misses the spirit of the 1975 film and the short story, it's just how it doesn't properly come together, which is really odd when you look at who directed it. The man who directed this film also directed Die Hard, Predator, and Die Hard with a Vengeance, all really solid action films, and it doesn't explain how this film became such a train wreck. And one of the main reasons the 2002 version falls apart is because it doesn't understand what Rollerball represents. Rollerball in the short story was a figurative statement about society, and the game was meant as a method to appease the masses as a hyper-violent sport, in similar fashion to the gladiatory games of Rome, with the people wanting ever more violence and spectacle out of this sporting event. Where the short story focuses mainly on the violence of the game, the 1975 film goes into greater depth about the game's deeper meaning and intent. The world of the 1975 film is one that sprang up after great wars and the overall collapse of national governments, and corporations rose to fill the power vacuum and created their own new society. One with luxury and comfort, but at the cost of personal freedom. And the sport of Rollerball is a game designed to highlight the insignificance of individual action, and without everyone working together, nothing is achieved. So Rollerball is more than just a sport, it's a symbolic meaning for the world they've built. What the 2002 film does is takes the sport and shifts it to Central Asia, with it being nothing more than a pay-per-view type event that's only goal is ratings and money. What the 2002 film misses is all the nuances and world building that the 1975 film did. The resulting world created by the 1975 version of the film is much deeper and drastically more interesting. The 2002 film has its own atmosphere, but it's shallow and almost stereotypical in the way the teams are shown in this performance piece, that it just ultimately doesn't represent anything meaningful in the film. You could say that the 2002 version of the film is an attempt to satire modern sports culture, with the ever-increasing need for better hits, better shots, things like that, but ultimately it just falls short and doesn't ever really deliver on it. In the 2002 version, violence is important to how the sport is played, but if you watch through the film, the violence is pretty much engineered. It's not an actual animal instinct to attack each other. Where in the short story Rollerball Murder, the violence is an already existing part of the game, and the game grows ever more aggressive in the way the game is played, and people are killed on the track, and it's accepted as a fact. Where in the 2002 version, it's almost like this weird performance thing, and any injury is played for more ratings, as opposed to where the injuries are just part of the game, which is just how the 1975 version of the film works. Alright, so moving on from that, let's talk about the main character. You have Jonathan E. in the 1975 Rollerball, and then you have Jonathan Cross in the 2002. I honestly don't know why they changed the name. The two films have completely different interpretations of the character of Jonathan. In the 2002 version, Jonathan begins the film as someone who honestly seems like a person with no direction. And apparently he wants to be in the National Hockey League, but is basically doing extreme sport activities, which seems counterproductive to being drafted to an actual sports team. But ultimately, he joins the Rollerball team that his buddy Marcus recruited him for because he has to flee the country over something relatively minor. And it's actually pretty odd. His motivations are really purely selfish. Also, the way Chris Klein plays the character comes off rather airheaded. It's almost like the director wouldn't let him have more than one take.
What's up, Denny?
With Jonathan's journey to Rollerball, he doesn't work at it. He's just good at it. He doesn't have to try. There's no struggling for him. He doesn't have to train up to do it. So his character is just this selfish ball hog who doesn't really play along with his team. Jonathan's character is so sure of himself he doesn't even wear protective armor, which could save his life and protect his spine. And this will play a little bit of a thing in the movie later, but we'll come back to that. The manner in how Chris Klein plays Jonathan is completely different than how the 1975 version does it. Jonathan E. in Rollerball 1975 was a champion because he worked hard, and he admitted that it was because he was mean and experienced, and the sport was a huge part of who he was, and the sport became eventually what he lived for. You can see in James Caan's performance of Jonathan that there is a drastic shift in his personality between when he's off the track and when he's on the track. In the short story, there's a moment when Jonathan is looking at photographs of himself, and he realizes that the person he pretends to be off the track is fake, and the person he is when he's on the track in the photographs is who he really is. And Rollerball is a crucial part of his identity. The 1975 film implies this through Jonathan's behavior. When he's off the track, Jonathan is very quiet and introverted, but when he's on the track, he's very loud and in command the entire time. And this is the crucial difference between the films. Jonathan in the 1975 film grows better and better at Rollerball and becomes the champion, and stays champion for 10 years. His skills grow in direct opposition to the purpose of the game. So he begins to stand out in a society that wants the individual to believe his efforts are meaningless outside of a collective environment. So already we have a drastic difference in motivations for the main characters. So far, the 1975 film is more interesting. And it's not like James Caan tried hard. Honestly, some of his scenes off the tracks are pretty dull, and he kind of mumbles to himself a little bit in some of the scenes as well. But in a way, this is almost meant to reflect disinterest in himself outside of Rollerball. Okay, now that we have a decent idea of the both Jonathans, let's compare the plots. The 1975 film is set in a dystopian future, where freedom is traded for comfort and luxury, and a type of class system. The 2002 version is set in basically present day, and it's also set in one of the Stan nations. Money is important, and ratings drive everything. So, the sport grows more and more violent to drive ratings, and accidents become more prevalent to boost people's interest, and thus boost the ratings. So there is something just more appealing about the 1975 film, at least in my opinion. The main conflict in Rollerball 1975 is that Jonathan E., who plays for Houston, has become the champion of the sport, and he's held that position for more than 10 years. And the leadership in the corporate society are growing increasingly worried about the attention Jonathan is getting. So they basically enact plans to get Jonathan to retire. However, Jonathan doesn't know why they want him to retire, so as a result, Jonathan doesn't want to quit a sport that he's grown to love. So in order to increase pressure on Jonathan, the corporations start changing the rules of the game, making the sport more dangerous for the players involved. As a result, the game starts turning into large brawls until the last man is left standing. So Jonathan is caught in a situation where the rules are changing to force him out, but he won't leave because he doesn't want his team to face these changes without him. So in abstract, the conflict in the 1975 film is one of individual identity versus the greater wants of a society that's ideologically opposed to individuality. But more so in the sense that this new corporate society makes decisions for you, and they don't want you making your own. Because in the film, almost everything has become decided by the corporation. So Jonathan not wanting to do it is in direct opposition to their demands. The conflict in Rollerball 2002 is that the game owners are extremely corrupt. And in an effort to make the game more interesting, they begin plotting accidents. So this is where the film falls apart. So, in essence, other teams are in on these accidents, at least key players are, but no one on Jonathan's team seems to be aware of these things. But going around hurting your players seems like it would really be against your best interests as a team owner. But then again, literally at the first sign of trouble, our character Jonathan in the film and his friend Marcus just take off, leaving their team to fend for themselves, and then they just do this whole run for the border. And in a really odd change of pace for the filming, the movie has a green filter added. I have to go into depth on this because it is such an odd segment. It's this large chase scene, but apparently they filmed it without checking the lighting, so the entire segment is too dark. So as a result, they go back and digitally add a green effect to make it look like you're watching it through a night vision scope. And then, during the motorcycle chase, they add this sound. Not once, but twice. And I'm not messing with you, I didn't add this sound, it's actually in the film, and I don't understand why they picked that. It just undermines the seriousness of the film. Oh yeah, remember how I said the body armor thing would come back into play for Jonathan Cross' spinal protection? Yeah, so there's an entire segment towards the end of the film, in Rollerball 2002, where the players start bringing in these sharpened, I would say lacrosse sticks, that allegedly they use to catch the balls, and they're going to use them to kill Jonathan because he doesn't wear the spinal protection. But here's the funny thing about that. Before that point in the film, you actually only see one of those lacrosse catching sticks in like 2 frames. I watched the entire film several times trying to find it, and you don't really see them. And so it's actually almost comedic if you think about it in the sense that this tool appears at the end because they actually almost ran out of ideas. So it makes me think there was actually more thought behind this that they weren't allowed to go into. It illustrates to me that RollerBall 2002 doesn't know what it wants to be, and the $70 million allocated for it were for an idea of a film that wasn't necessarily what it became. Initially, at least on what I've read, there were some theories going around about how RollerBall 2002 was in fact a prequel to RollerBall 1975, and this was based on the initial ending the director had shot. But unfortunately, due to test audiences hating it, and the film coming off as, quoting MGM executives as, too Asian, the ideas were scrapped and the ending was reshot to what we got, eventually, in American theaters. And what brings this prequel concept to the forefront would have to be how the ending of RollerBall 2002 comes to pass, and how it's incredibly different than RollerBall 1975. RollerBall 2002 ends with Jonathan basically being forced back into the game after trying to escape, and through a series of events basically breaks through the glass and fights the individual responsible for the game and the accidents to the players. But after that happens, there's almost a series of more uncontrolled riots which explode outward from the Rollerball facility. So in the short story Rollerball Murder, there's actually talk of the Asian Wars, which eventually led to the collapse of nations and the corporate wars. So the groundwork and blueprints are there for this potential uprising based around the Rollerball game to expand outward and cause the other basically stand nations to either unify or basically fall apart into these greater revolutions and wars. So geopolitically, it's possible that that was what the director wanted to go for. And I think it's an unfortunate thing that he didn't get to actually fulfill that dream and build upon the story he was attempting to build. Because what we eventually got from RollerBall 2002 was a story that had potential, but ultimately it failed in a lot of areas, namely editing, where scenes are just poorly cut together. RollerBall 1975, in my opinion, ends in a perfect way, where essentially Jonathan, after having defeated the last player on the other team, because the rules have been changed to where Rollerball had effectively become nothing more than a blood sport, the entire crowd begins to chant his name, because in that moment he has risen above anything in their corporate system. He is the almost, I would say, worship of many of these people. So that's how that story ends, on his face after completing the game. And that can symbolize a lot of things. It can symbolize the loss of authority in the corporate system, or a number of other ideas that can be expanded upon. But it leaves it up to you to interpret it. And it was one of those films made in the 70s that wasn't meant to have a sequel. It was meant to give you the story and then end it. And that's why Rollerball 1975 has a more longer-lasting ending, because it was allowed to be the film it wanted to be. Rollerball 2002 appears to have just too much meddling, too many ideas going into one thing, and then it just falling apart. But thanks for tuning in to the Historic Nerd today. Hope you have a wonderful evening, night, or day, or whatever it is you happen to be doing.
You don't look so good. What's going on?
Well, you see, you hit the pod ramp and jump, and then I cross under and go, and then you shot in the free throw, and then you did the 440, so I wasn't sure, but I think you scored the touchdown.
If you like this content, I highly suggest you check out my website, HistoricNerd.com. I also highly suggest you check out theconsoleexplosion.com. It has a number of other content providers there that generate quite a bit of good work that you might find enjoyable. If you want to say something to me directly, feel free to contact me at HistoricalNerd on Twitter.com. So feel free. All right, thank you very much for dropping by. Have a great night, evening, or day, whatever it is you're doing. Bye.